So anything you can and say will be shown and could be used against you. So please ask questions that are only relevant to this topic. Saving you from you. And this is why the camera is disabled. All right. So tonight we're going to talk about Blazor. And I'm super excited about Blazor. My name's Auri Rahimzadeh, and I'm a software architect. I also own a small business here in town and just written a few books. And I always love presenting on various technologies. I've been working on the Microsoft stack for a long time. I think since 1996. So whatever that is, is that almost 30 years? I think so, 28 years, thereabouts, right? So I remember I learned I learned VBA from a teach yourself VBA. Yeah, teach yourself VBA, or maybe it was VB6. It's been that long. Teach yourself Visual Basic in 24 hours. It was one of those white Sam's books. Anybody remember those? Right? Those were the best for learning anything. And you could, they gave you a high level, and then this before, like there's like information everywhere. You could steal everything from Stack Overflow, and GitHub Copilot exists, and that would get you in. I think that's how I got my first like real software development job. Is I'd been writing code myself, but I needed to learn ASP.NET. So I was like, yeah, I'll go learn that. Took a week, learned ASP.NET. Got hired on as the lead software engineer at a startup. That was great. I've been coding for a while prior to that, but those books were so great. So I always love introing people in new tech. And so hopefully we have a lot of fun tonight. Ask questions along the way. If you have any questions, he's checking the chat. So if you're online, ask questions. And of course, if you're in the live audience, just raise your hands. I'll see you, even though I took my glasses off so I can read my screen. You're not all a blur to me. If you have any questions, just scan the QR code. So yay. And that'll connect you with my LinkedIn and all my other stuff. And then even like my Lick site, not Link, Lick, which is I'm a big bourbon enthusiast. So I built a website for managing my bourbon collection and all my tastings. And that's completely written in Blazor using Blazor server. So if you have any questions about how that was done, I'll show you, like what it looks like later on. But we'll walk through a few different examples of just Blazor from the beginning to kind of a little bit more complex scenarios. So I think I should also explain where we've come, where we came from and how we got to where we are today. Back in the day, it used to be like request page, load page, and there would be a request in between. The screen would flash for a moment, and then information would appear. So one page, you fill out a form or click a link, etc. That sends a request to the server, and then the entire page gets re-rendered after the server request is finished processing. Well, we don't do things that way anymore, right? Remember when we went to Web 2.0, and now there was like Web 3.0. I don't even know what we're calling it anymore. I don't even think we call it web anymore. It's just all those terms have gone away. But we have single page applications are the big thing. And we've had various platforms out there that have enabled it. And they're basically load page, change state. So you load the page once, and then a whole bunch of code, be it JavaScript or JavaScript plus APIs, it's usually a combination of those two, constantly changes the screen to represent the state of the application. Bless you. Yeah, sometimes people are allergic to TypeScript and APIs. And just, okay, I'm not going to make a bug joke. Thank you. Okay, it's almost flu season, so, okay. Anyway, you get a much more responsive application though. So, everything seems quicker. You only update the pieces of the page that should be updated. Now, it's a much better experience for the consumer, to be sure, 100%. But to make that work takes a lot of technologies. It takes a lot of tech. And usually it takes front end and back end developers. And when I say front end, let me define that as folks who know not just HTML and CSS, but who know TypeScript/JavaScript. And those front end developers often may know the basics, at least, of talking to an API. But oftentimes, unless they're the unicorn full stack engineer, everybody loves to say full stack engineer. We're going to hire full stack engineers. Everyone's a full stack engineer. That's not true. If you're a complete full stack engineer, you have weaknesses in some part, and that's okay. That's okay. Yeah, that's software engineering. That's why you have a team. But it gets expensive. If you have to have the folks that can wire up the front end, you also need those back end developers. Thankfully, these days, to some extent, you don't need DBAs. Don't kill me for saying that, anyone who's on the call or anyone here who is a DBA. But for the most part, things have been so simplified today that for most applications, you don't need a DBA. And I'll fight you on it if you want to go out there. But after the presentation. So if you want to fight about that stuff and ORMs and Andy framework versus Dapper, and your virtual, feel free to meet me in Indianapolis and we'll talk about it like gentlemen and do pull requests or something. And we'll do code reviews so we agree with each other. Yes.
Are we saying no DBAs or no?
Ooh, that's tough. I still think you need SQL developers. And I think you need DBAs, but I think you need DBAs over on like Azure side, like over in the data center. Like people are making all the algorithms and such better for detecting the stuff that normally a DBA would do per application. For example, and not to get off topic, but it's a great question. Automatic index creation and dropping. DBAs. Great. They can look at that and go, oh yeah, this is where all your performance issues are. But you could also automate that. So I think overall, we're finding a lot of places where we're automating a lot of the optimization. Just because we have so many examples, we can train systems to look for that sort of stuff. Does that make sense? So if you're in insurance company, right? Or you're a credit card processor, you're a Fortune 1000 company. You deal with, and I'll do something really small, 100 transactions a second, right? I mean, that's not unheard of, right? I mean, can you even fathom what Visa has to deal with billions of transactions a day? I mean, I don't know the math off the top of my head, but imagine the parallelism of that, right? They need a DBA, right? Not just one, right? Right? I mean, they need software architects, DBAs, and they need to be in lockstep with each other to deliver an enterprise, a set of enterprise application services at that scale. Oh, yeah. I mean, just the teams have to come together to make an application that's so reliant on technology work is definitely a great conversation over bourbon. I don't want to use everybody's time today on that, but that's tough. That's really tough. Beautiful when they get it. But getting back to the point, it's expensive to have let's say, a JavaScript developer and a backend developer, especially if you're doing something small, right? But you need both sides. If you're building a web application or any user-facing application, there's going to be a user interface. So you have to wire both sides up, no matter what, unless you're writing a game, And even with a game, you kind of have to do it if you have any network gameplay. So there has to be front end, there has to be back end. There's generally no escaping it in the modern day and age. So anyway, the real leaders in this up until recently and today, I'm not going to say up until, I should correct that. Today are React and Angular for creating single page applications. Huh? I have that in there. I've got it's written right there. It's written right. But you know what? The number of times that I've met anyone who writes anything in Vue or Vue or however it's said, GIF, uh, I I don't think I've ever met someone where it was a first class platform decision for them. Other than they're like, oh, I tried it and it was so great, but they go back to work the next day and that's not what they're developing it. Yeah.
I had some experience, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's all kind of the same, right? I mean, you really need to forget the framework as much as you have to know the pattern. Know the pattern and you'll pick up the framework, right? MVC, MVVM, learn those and it'll make your life easier. If you only look at things as it's React or it's Angular, picking up those is going to be so much more difficult if you don't understand the pattern involved. But that's a whole separate conversation. But if you're a junior developer and you're listening to this and you don't know what patterns are like MVC, MVVM, etc., you need to go learn about patterns. It'll make a big difference for you in your software engineering career. Now, that being said, React and Angular are front-end solutions. They're front-end solutions. The back-end component that they work with, you'll hear Node, you'll hear ASP.NET APIs, you'll hear Azure Functions, you'll hear Lambda, but the point is a back-end is required. And oftentimes the back-end is in a different language because that's what the back-end developers understand. Often the back-end developers are .NET folks or Java folks. And the front-end folks are JavaScript / TypeScript. And it seems that we're almost entirely moving over to TypeScript. Thank God. Yeah, TypeScript is so nice. And now it's turned into like a first-class citizen. Anybody remember TypeScript in the early days? Yeah. Okay. So yeah. Yay. And that's when you had to pay for text editors, remember? When you had to pay for like Atom or whatever. Anyway. So Angular and React are the kings right now in the SPA, and web front end game. But Microsoft has come in and said, hey, hold up. We recognize that there's a problem. Not everyone wants to go and write a bunch of JavaScript just to work with the APIs that we built. We know what that is, right? That's duplication of effort. That's expensive when you write things twice. If I have an object that represents a customer and I have to write that object in C# and I have to write it in TypeScript or JavaScript, not only is that double the code that had to be written, it's double the code that has to be maintained, it's double the code that has to be deployed, it's double the technical debt potential. That gets expensive real fast, especially as your application gets more and more complex. So Microsoft, as you've seen with their other solutions, such as Xamarin, right, which is now .NET Mobile Framework, says, hold up, we're going to make this easier for you. Why don't you just write it all in .NET? And we'll give you a technology that lets you do that. Well, that's pretty freaking cool. Because if I could bring in all my objects or most of my objects and reuse, let's say 90% of the code and only work with changing UI elements, as long as it's still HTML and CSS, I don't need to hire a whole fleet of JavaScript developers just to wire up a UI. That has a huge impact on the bottom line development cost of an application, and the maintenance cost, and the time to market. So if I want, let's say I have a back end and I have an internal application and I want to add some customer facing piece to it, most of my auth I could reuse. I can just expose the pieces that I want using objects and security policies that I already have a development team that's familiar with. These are huge. I can move those components, if they're all common, into a mobile application. And then, of course, it's Microsoft, so it can all tie into Azure, right? There's an Azure tie-in to everything. I mean, come on. We all buy into a certain ecosystem, and Azure's one of them. And they're the number one, number two, Amazon and Microsoft. So you're going to buy in. So Microsoft, as of I think I heard it's even earlier in .NET 6, .NET 3.1, right? So the first time I got into this was with .NET 6. And we're at .NET 8 and now it was probably all preview and just don't touch this. It was first generation Microsoft technology. So I got into it with .NET 6, and then I moved into .NET 8, and now we've got .NET 9 previews out. And I've really loved it. Like, to the point that most of my applications, I will start with Blazor for the front end. And now that's personal preference to some extent, but that's because I'm a .NET developer. I still outsource all my design. I get HTML and CSS back, but I can implement it all without writing any JavaScript for the most part. So what is Blazor? Blazor is a client UI framework, and it supports multiple scenarios, which we'll get into. But you can use C# for your UI and your business logic. So you no longer have to wire up all your UI in JavaScript and then make an API call, which, if you've ever had to do that in JavaScript, is not fun. I don't care how easy you make it. It does not quickly, easily implement or integrate into what you're doing on the page at that time. It doesn't. React makes it better. Thank God. Love the components. Yay, TSX. But you can use C# on the front end and the back end. That's the key. No JavaScript knowledge, for the most part, necessary. And like I said before, no more client is TypeScript, back end is C#. Generally, there's no API necessary. For a smaller application, you don't have to build an API to make the front end and the back end talk to each other, because it's the same application, depending on the approach you take. Today, we're going to talk about the one called server, which the application actually lives on the server, but it looks like it's a full stateful application in the browser. And it covers web, offline, and mobile now. So with .NET 6, you didn't really have it. It was sort of a preview, and Microsoft wasn't committed with Blazor in mobile. But now Blazor Mobile Hybrid is a real thing that's part of the template in Visual Studio. So if you want to build a Blazor or an app, a mobile app, iOS and Android, using Maui. Anyone here know Maui? Okay, multi-application UI. That's what has basically replaced Xamarin on the front end side. And then .NET Mobile Framework is in the back end instead of everything being called Xamarin. You could do it all in Blazor now. So you could build your front end website, make it mobile responsive, and your mobile application, obviously mobile responsive, it's a mobile app. It'll use different components. It'd be silly to do it otherwise. And your back end, all with one code base, all using shared business logic, business objects, business. Code reuse, reuse. That is amazing. If you've ever tried the experience of kind of going from managing an Android application and an iOS application separately, and then going to a cross-platform solution, be it React Native or Xamarin, that sudden wow epiphany is what you get with Blazor. Because suddenly I didn't have to write it twice. And if I fixed it once, I fixed it everywhere. And I mean, technical debt has a cost. Code rewriting has a cost. And time to market has a cost. And everybody's breathing down your back or your neck. I don't know, what's the best? To get higher quality code out sooner. One way you do that is by not writing the same code twice. God forbid in multiple languages. Because if you ever learn multiple languages like speaking, it's easy to offend someone if you get certain words wrong. Lost in translation. Same thing applies to code. So, like I said, there's 3 different scenarios. One is client server via SignalR. This is the server scenario. So basically your application sits on the server and there's a connection between the front end and the back end that just sends messages back and forth, and most of the execution occurs on the server. But it still acts as if it was a full SPA. Yeah, what's up, Jason? Okay. Oh, sorry. I just saw like my transcript. I'm like, that's a lot of questions. I'm like, whoa. They're just repeating back to me what I said. That all sounds great. So Ryan says that all sounds great, but how well does Blazor scale, as in any limitations that have been found? That's a great question. So for server, because you're doing more work on the back end, you're going to have to consider scale. For small applications, I think you're okay with like what's called an S1 instance in Azure. That's like one step up from basic, because I think the more memory, the better because of SignalR. It's just like any application that has a number of sessions. The more memory, the better, because it needs to track all the communication with all of those different connections to the server. But you can scale it pretty easily on the SignalR front, which I think takes up the brunt of the communications. The processing itself would scale just like any other application. But the communication, I think, is your bottleneck. Now, you could scale up the server to have more memory, but Azure actually provides a SignalR as a service, and you can swap that out. So you can say, instead of using the SignalR that's built into the application that I deployed, actually use Azure for all the SignalR communication, and that can actually scale out globally. So if you start putting your application in different data centers, so if you really scale this out, you'll want to use that decentralized SignalR solution. And that's when you go through, I think it's just simply called Azure SignalR. But if you go through like the Microsoft Learn Beyond the Fundamentals, it does talk about Azure SignalR. So hopefully that answers your question there. That's your bottleneck. Does the Blazor and Maui mobile app? Z was asking, does the Blazor and Maui mobile app be native mobile app or runs on mobile browser? How's the performance compared to other native mobile apps? I don't have definitive answers on that yet. My understanding is with the native, the Blazor mobile hybrid is that it's not just simply running the uh, application in a web browser inside of the container. But I'm not 100% sure on the performance there. Um, so I don't have a good answer on that one yet because I haven't tried it out myself. Um, so I'll maybe follow up with me in about a month when I have played with that more. Uh, but there's so many applications that are out there now that have web in the back um, that are insanely performant that I think you're fine. I don't think it's going to be like the phone gap apps of 10 years ago. I don't think you have that problem. I still think you get the native controls and everything that you're looking for. But as to its performance to, let's say, a React Native, which I think would be the most appropriate comparison, I don't know that yet, and I don't want to venture a guess until I try it. Uh, Also, how can we integrate microservices into an SPA? Like if you have 10 to 20, but the UI will be one, how do we approach this? Um, well, nothing prevents you from using the microservices. I think what you're asking is, will all the calls to the microservices happen over that Signal R connection? Um, I would think in that case it would. So at that point, you might want to start taking a look at making API calls, or maybe probably using the like the WebAssembly version, where you bring that code down to the client and make all the calls from the client and don't do all that work on the server, especially if you're going to be doing a lot of calls. Like architecturally, it doesn't make sense to move that load over to the server to do it. But I don't know your particular scenario. So you're not limited, I think, in um, your approach. And I think you can do a combination. I think so, right? You can do a combination of WebAssembly and server. I have not tried that yet, but I think that might be an approach that you could take. So it's not so opinionated of a framework that it's either or. But as with any application, you should take a look at what your specific needs are, the load that you expect that you'll have, how your users will use the application, and choose the appropriate architecture for that. Now, to be fair, you could also change over time. You could start with, the server-based Blazor, and then move things over to WebAssembly over time. And then I think someone was mentioning here earlier with the WebAssembly, you can even use like a CDN, for some of the stuff, for like the to distribute the application. So you might get some benefits there, although that wouldn't fix your API calls. If you're using microservices, though, you're probably using functions. So you're already capable of scaling globally anyway. And that one's up to you how you want to handle that. But definitely before you start writing code, come up with your application architecture for phase one. I'm going to take my architect hat off in a moment. But also plan out, hey, if we scale up, plan out an idea for phase two to lead your team to success, for how they should think about this application as they move forward, so they don't kind of hard code things that are going to make it hard to move later. All right. Okay. So we're going to talk about Blazor Server today. We're not going to get into the other two. Now, I will give you a heads up. If you are using IIS for all your debugging, by default in Windows, when you install IIS, WebSockets are disabled. And you'll be wondering, why the hell isn't anything working for me? Or why is it slow? Because it will fall back to polling, but everything will be slow and horrible. Go turn WebSockets on. Okay, it drove me nuts the first time I had to figure this out, and so I tell everyone now. So we're going to go through 3 different projects. we're not going to spend forever on this. And if you have more questions, I'm happy to meet anyone and explain this. Definitely ask questions along the way. Everyone's doing that. I would say you're going to want Visual Studio 2022 or higher. It doesn't matter if it's community or enterprise. I've got enterprise, but that's only because someone's paying for it. Yeah, enterprise is pretty cool though. Like if you can get someone to pay for it, enterprise is really cool. Make sure you're running .NET 8 or higher to get the latest features, the latest version of Blazor. This is like every other Microsoft technology and pretty much any other technology on the planet. Why would you run the earlier versions of it? Run the latest. They'll have the bug fixes, the new features. You don't have to run the preview. I'm not recommending that. I'm just saying run the latest release version. And if you want to use VS Code, that's fine. We won't be using that today. And we're not going to go through walking through how to build each application. That's not the scope of this presentation. Microsoft Learn is a great solution to go to, a great place that's free to go to learn Blazor if you want step-by-step instructions. Now, SignalR is incredibly important here for the server version of Blazor. It's the magic behind Blazor Server. It uses WebSockets to handle the communication, and it can even fall back. You don't ever want it to fall back, but it can fall back if it needs to. But it's Microsoft's really lightweight client server messaging solution, and it is bare bones. Like if you've ever heard of UDP, anyone here know what UDP is? Universal Datagram Protocol, right? Or maybe unreceived datagram protocol if you want to laugh about network technology. Basically, it's throw it out there and hope it made it. Okay? I mean, it still works. It works great, but you don't get like a bunch of whiz-bang features. It's free. But it does work really well. Like I can show you some really cool stuff I've done I love SignalR because it's so stupid easy to implement. Now, WebSockets, just so you know, is not HTTP. It's a TCP protocol. So keep that in mind. It hasn't really affected me yet, but some people might think, oh, it's HTTP. It'll work over everything. No, it's not. Now, like I said, it's incredibly simple. You also have no choice. If you're going to use Blazor Server, you're using SignalR. Now, how can you scale it? We just talked about that with one of the our guests' questions. You can scale it with Azure SignalR. So if you want, you can absolutely scale this globally. Microsoft uses it all over the place. A lot of your applications use SignalR. It's been around a long time, and there's a reason Microsoft hasn't deprecated it, because it just simply works. It's reliable, and it works. Just understand the limitations of it, because it is simply a messaging solution. That is it. And it can send to groups. That's it. Like, you can't tell how many people are connected. You can't. The point is to send a message to a group. Now, there are similar solutions. Like I said, don't get a choice for the SignalR piece of it, but that doesn't mean that you don't have choice when it comes to messaging solutions in general. So it's not like suddenly your application must use SignalR for everything. You could still use Firebase messaging, Socket.io, and I think there's another one called, I don't remember. I'm not going to guess, but there were like 3 when I was looking at alternatives. But definitely, even though you don't have to understand how SignalR works, it'd be good to at least read the basics of it. Because as you scale your application, there's SignalR settings that you're going to want to tweak as you deploy your applications to production. And that's okay. You'll learn about that. So like I said, we'll go over three sites. We'll go over the default Blazor template just to give you a lay of the land. What does this look like when you just, new project, go. 2, we're going to look at the pizza company website. That's what Microsoft uses in MS Learn. And then I'll also show you from one of my actual applications I have in production, kind of what I did. So I even brought this up. Hopefully everyone can see it. We're going to just do new project. This is programming interview 101. Can you start Visual Studio and create a new project? We're going to see if I pass. Usually what I do is I choose the wrong template. Like, what the hell? Why is Visual Basic the default for some reason, right? It happens. It happens that you're like, no, and then you got to go delete it. Yeah, it's okay. So this is really difficult. Click Blazor web app. And then hit, I'm just making sure I didn't choose like Visual Basic or something. Okay, next. And then we'll call it Blazor F1 because I'm gonna throw it away. Let's say cdev playground. Okay to delete. I'll probably already have a folder named OK to delete. Just wait. Blazor F1. Everything looks good. We'll hit next. And then it'll ask you, very similar to ASP.NET sites, right? I mean, nothing about this is really different. So we've got the framework. I'm going to choose .NET 8, which is LTS. For those who don't know, that means long-term support. I'm not using the authentication. If you plan on using authentication, or you think you will, enable this anyway, because it makes some changes over to the app.razor, which kind of like runs a good part of your site, where you can tell it to automatically set everything to auto or everything to server, like the modes. We'll get into those. If you don't do that, you'll run into issues where the login page will just flash forever and you won't be able to log in. And you'll be very angry. Yeah. 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 It's not .NET 10, but it's like old .NET. It's like, oh, okay. Well, it's only like 3 lines of code to fix it. Oh, well, we're not talking about WebAssembly. I told you that in the beginning. I'm just messing with you. It's all good. So if you didn't hear that, there could be issues if you try using authentication with the WebAssembly approach, but there's apparently workarounds online. Let's see. Interactivity. So some of these things, we'll go through them. Here's your options. Your interactive render mode. We're going to choose server, which is the default. You can also do WebAssembly, and then you can even do auto, which can choose between server and WebAssembly. We're going to use server for this. The interactivity location, you can say you define this per page or globally. I'm just going to keep it where it is, but I generally set this globally, but I've run into issues. I'm not going to change anything else. And yep, and I'm going to include the sample pages. So if you don't want to learn Blazor, get rid of the sample pages. Like if you're just like you're already going to have a design, etc., you can get rid of the sample pages. But we're going to use the sample pages because they are great for, well, showing a sample of how Blazor works. And then we will hurry up and wait. I will increase the text size, but I'm just going to wait for everything to do its thing. So please bear with me as this does what you have seen every single time for the most part when you have created a new web application in Visual Studio and then waited for ReSharper to scan the project. Huh? ReSharper's got a lot faster though. Remember when it used to take a few minutes? Now it's like 12 seconds, you know? So, I can't really, well, I guess I can just hit Control Plus. There we go, Windows Plus. We'll zoom in on this a little bit. So here's Blazor app 1. A lot of this should look very familiar to you if you've ever built a recent ASP.NET website. I don't think I have to explain much here, but you've got your dependencies, you've got any connected services, but most of the time you're going to spend your time here in www root and everything underneath. So www root looks like pretty much all of them. Really doesn't change all that much. And then you've got your components, and this is where a lot of this is where all of your Blazor stuff lives. Now, a few key items. This is also very similar. Is you've got your main layout and you've got your nav menu. I imagine you can figure out what these do. The main layout is your overall layout, and the nav menu is what's injected into the main layout for handling nav. Yay. Pages. Counter is just an example page that shows how you can increment a counter and see it work without writing any JavaScript whatsoever. Error is the default error page. So anytime there's an error on the site, this is the page that will show up. Home, hopefully I don't have to explain that one. And then weather shows you how you can make some API calls and populate a page interactively. Now, before we get into those, I'm just going to show you a few other key ones. These are important to understand. Imports is your global imports. So let me get off of this and I will increase my... All right, can everyone see that? Okay. These are your global imports. So if you start using libraries like Syncfusion or Infragistics or other NuGet packages, etc., or models that you're bringing in, add references here so you don't have to add usings at the top of every one of your pages. It's just simpler. So remember to do this. Then app.razor. This is what brings everything together. So it looks just like a regular page. This is actually very similar if you've ever seen React or Angular. What do we have? We've usually got, I think on Angular, there's like one div that holds the Angular application. I think just says app or whatever the name of the app is. And then right above that, or probably below it, is a reference to Angular, right? Same thing here. It's almost copy and paste whatever Angular and React are doing. Is they bring in their routes, and then they bring in the Blazor web. So think of that as your Angular or your React reference if you want to think of some example. Everything else, pretty self-explanatory. And then there's head outlet. So head outlet, very similar to the days of yore. And if you remember at ASPX, there were certain tags you could use to put code up in or put stuff into the header versus the body. So you could say page title is a special tag in Blazor, and you can set the page title. And that will go into the head outlet. So makes sense if you've ever used a Microsoft framework before. There are special tags that will put things in different places. So let's take a look at what this thing does. Before we hop into code, let's get a picture of what our definition of done is, right? So let us pray and hope that this compiles, because I just did new. Waiting. Localhost. Hello world. Everything's done. This is all we've ever wanted. So let's go to the counter. I think hello world doesn't really tell you much of anything. And I hit click. Ooh. I can just click. How's it doing that? Yay. So let's take a look at what is going on. Let's look at the counter. So there's that page title I was telling you about, right? Now it says, here's the route to the page. That's what this top one is. So if I go to whack counter, I will end up here. Take a look at our site. There it is. Counter. The page title. Page title has been set. And then everything's just HTML. There's nothing special about that. And then I have P role equals status. Role isn't a special Blazor thing. That's HTML. And then current count is current count. You got that little special at, which is a reference to bind the value. So at is bind. Okay? Very so remember, everybody remember like the percent symbols in old classic ASP? And we all remember PHP. Well, welcome back to 1994. But in a better way. So here we have our code on the page. Note, no JavaScript. We just declare a variable. Current count is 0. And then we say, we create a function, increment count. All it does is current count plus plus. This is like college level 101 stuff, right? Make something that makes the counter go up. And the cool thing is I just have a button, and then I've got some Bootstrap, right? Bootstrap classes. Bootstrap's included in the template. And I bind the on-click event handler to the function. That's it. That's all I do. Very similar to JavaScript. And then click me, all that's regular HTML. And then it runs. So I could actually go over here, put a breakpoint. First class debugging tools. And I hit click me. Boom. I am now debugging C# code. And it really is that simple. Yep. But without all the state management going back and forth in, oddly enough, base 64 encoded, unencrypted format. Yeah. Simpler times. Now, I could do more than that, obviously. But the key was to show you how simple this is to wire up. You just bind. It's all about binding. It's very simple. Weather is a little bit more complicated. It pulls out to getting data from a third-party service. So we'll take a look at weather. Oh. So check this out. If I don't have any forecasts yet, I want you to show loading, which is smart because the code hasn't run yet. This is important when you get into Blazor. Assume everything is null before it's actually pulled any of the data. So don't start reading data before it has a value. You will get null reference errors. On the Blazor side, it'll just say an error has occurred. Reload. But if you take a look while you're debugging, you will see it's because you were reading data, you were reading null objects. Very simple, just like any code where you read null objects, bad things are bound to happen. So we have a table. I mean, it looks like a table. And then we just have a for each. It's like the best parts of the React TSX. If anyone knows what that is.
C#
Huh?
C# for each.
Yeah. So here it has a weather forecast array. It's nullable. And then you do have certain events in Blazor where you can do things before the page is sent off to the client. So on initialize is basically before render. And then there's another call for after rendered async. And it's all async. And async is a first class citizen here. Thank you. Yes. Oh, okay. All right, let me answer those questions. So memories, that's awesome. So Mark and Ryan have questions. Hopefully I didn't miss anybody else. It doesn't look like I did. Mark asks, if you change the value of a variable while debugging, will it reflect in the browser? Yes. What's my opinion on the whole C# versus JavaScript? Do I feel that my C# options are more advanced than JavaScript? I'm not sure what you mean by options. So if you could clarify that, that would help. I don't think this replaces JavaScript in its entirety. I think there's libraries out there that we're going to want to use. There's very powerful grids. JavaScript is an insanely rich ecosystem. And I don't think Blazor comes out saying, throw away all your JavaScript. But it does say, hey, reuse your business logic. And if you want to reuse some of the web components that are out there that are JavaScript based, you can do that too. So you're not stuck having to choose one or the other with Blazor. It's not a decision that you have to make. But when it comes to enforcing my business rules, my business logic, I'm going to go the C# route. Read into that. I don't want to rewrite my code every time to use my business objects. That's the key. Just more so, do you think you can do more easily with C# versus what you would do with JavaScript? Yes, in certain cases, absolutely. Number one, and this is me. Arash, can you not hear me talking? Because I'm reading the questions back to people. Because I'm reading them off. Oh, cool. Yeah, so I'm trying to repeat the question. So if you don't hear it, let me know. So I'm a .NET developer. First class wise, that's the first thing I write in. Do I know TypeScript? Yes. Do I know JavaScript? Yes. Do I like switching languages on the same day to get work done? No. So if I can write most of my code in C# or reuse code that's already been written, especially Link and all the parallel stuff that I can do, and I'm really good at, I will do it. And I mean, that's just my go-to. So some things I think I could do more easily, like data manipulation, data sorting, making API calls, caching, etc. I think all of that I can do better on the .NET side. And I can make a combination of WebAssembly and, so I can keep code local and server to keep the performance balanced. Now, have I played with that enough yet? No. But the more I could keep in one language, the less developers I have to hire. And the more maintainable and reusable the code is. especially as I move to other platforms or other screens and environments like my functions, my mobile application, my web application, my mobile responsiveness. I mean, all those things, the less code I have to write twice, the better. Um, uh, and then Ryan asked, where do you think the line is for when you should do something in JavaScript versus C Sharp? I think you'll know it when you come to it. And that's not a cheeky response. For example, application insights in Blazor server. There is application insights will not work until you have wired up, until you've made a call to a JavaScript function that makes application insights work. Otherwise, if you call the logging function that you injected into your application, everything blows up because it doesn't have access to the HTTP client yet. So order of operations matters when you're using Blazor server. And you just find that out over time. Yeah, I mean, like anything where there's where you have to make a decision when you do something. Oftentimes that's independent. It depends, right? Only a Sith deals in absolutes. Huh? Huh? Okay. Someone would smile at that. Okay. Okay. So, oh, are we almost out of time? I have plenty of film.
Just give you a heads up.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. So here you can see I can make the call to get the weather forecast data, and then I just populate it on the page. It's very simple. It just wires right in. Now, as you can imagine, this could get pretty thick, right? Having all of this on the same page could be kind of annoying. So, can you do it the old way? You know, like where you had a code behind? Why, yes, you can. You can actually just Alt Enter, say move to code behind. Done. Because behind the scenes, the Blazor page is just rendering as a page. Now, I have not had the best of luck with hot reload with Blazor. It seems like some people have. Maybe not the best of luck, but some luck. Yeah, I've had it just not work. But who knows? I might have some config wrong. I don't know. Most of the time, it's not a problem. But my point here is to show that you can split the two. And if you look, there you go. Weather.razor.cs has automatically been created for you. There's your code behind. So if that's the way you prefer to do this, you can. I have started moving any page that's more than like a function or two into having a code behind, just because it's easier for me to kind of keep my head around it. Um, but your mileage may vary. Okay. It's, I don't know. I mean, is it any more performant? I don't think so because it's all compiled, you know. Um, I think it's personal preference, you know.
It's really complicated.
Yeah. And I've seen Microsoft, and I love Microsoft, and I love the fact that they continue to run like a software company. I mean, okay, yeah, they're worth $1 trillion. Well, but still, they turn out some of the best developer tools, and everyone uses it, even if they're not using Microsoft tools. Like everyone uses Visual Studio Code now, right? VS Code is everywhere. That's Microsoft. And Blazor, by the way, is also open sourced. So if you hate Microsoft, maybe you hate Microsoft from 20 years ago. Yeah, but Microsoft of 2024 is quite a different animal. Yeah. And what was being said in the audience is that it's good that it's kept simple because that helps beginners. And really, things doesn't get as complex as you want it to be. But as you can see, the approach to this is pretty simple. You know, on initialize async is kind of like the precursor to document ready. Document ready would probably be more like uh, on after render async. So, oh no, maybe not. Uninitialized async could be like document ready. Yeah, yeah, because that's when the it's going to start doing all the stuff that it needs to do to spit stuff out to the browser. Yay. It's fun mapping these things. Another reason I don't want to have to track all the JavaScript object, like events and track two different, completely different frameworks for how things work. Okay, so hopefully this gives you a taste for how you can kind of mix these things together. Um, it's really not that different on the uh, settings side. You'll just see it adds, where is it? Right here. You know, add map razor components app and add interactive server render mode. You know, really not that different from regular web applications that you build with .NET. Okay, so let's go to another example. And this is Blazing Pizza. So let me see, is that okay? This is the Microsoft example that they'll walk you through as you go through. Okay, come on, me. Okay, cool. You gotta be careful when you're like, yeah. I wish you could like move it over to like the right side or something, or just make it hide so I could like move my cursor to the top and just have it slide down, like I think Zoom does. They probably have a patent on it. So this obviously looks a lot better than the regular Blazor template. Yeah. So they don't walk you through all the HTML and CSS of this, uh, but it looks really nice. And you can click these. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes this doesn't work. I don't know why. Huh? That's weird. Oh, yeah. That's how their example is. Let me see if I can finally get this thing to work. No. No. It was my browser's been giving me some trouble with running Blazor applications, like I was telling you earlier, and so it's not bringing up the component. But I'll just let that sit in the background, and we'll see if it just fully comes up. But what I want to show you is what you can do in like your index. You can list all your specials, which I think is pretty self-explanatory, but you can also take uh, different HTML snippets with interactivity and turn them into components basically automatically. It's just there as long as you build the component. So here you can see the configure pizza dialog. And it takes pizza, which is the order state, which is configuring pizza, which is injected into the page. So how does injection work? Right? You're on a web page. Well, it's really difficult. You just say inject, type, and what you want the variable name to be. That's it. So if you want your logging instance and it's like an iLogger, you can say inject iLogger logger. If you have, let's say, a database service, like you're following the repository pattern and you want access to a repo, you can inject it and give it a name called like repo foo, whatever you want to call it. You just say inject If you've ever used React, you kind of see the services that get injected. Look how simple this is to do. HTTP client. So if you need to make API calls, you can grab that. And then the configure pizza dialog is just another component right here. It's under shared. It doesn't have to be under shared. And then it just has 3 parameters. Takes a pizza and then 2 event callbacks. And that's how you can pass code hooks into components. So you could change what event gets called, read delegation, in your component because you have these event callbacks. But that could change in the list based on what you're injecting in there. But you can reuse the component. Kind of cool, huh? So we'll see if this thing's working yet. Yeah, it's been giving me some hard times. I don't know why. I don't know if I did something wrong. I don't know. No, it was working before. Maybe I broke it. Anyway, that's how cool it is. So as you're building out your UI, you could call different business objects if you like. So you've got, pizza, which is an object type. You can say, get the formatted total price. And it's just there. On click. Everything's just bound. Nice and simple. Now, how do you handle that injection of services? The way you're used to it. So you can add your pizza store context. You can add your scoped order state. Nothing Blazor specific. Remember, Blazor is a client UI framework. It's not a replacement for ASP.NET. It's just running with ASP.NET, which means you could actually add Blazor to an existing ASP.NET web application and start using Blazor components and the server interactivity without changing the project, because you're just bringing in the Blazor NuGet package and adding, I think it's 1 line of configuration, and then you add there's one more file you have to add for I don't remember what it is, but I added it. I remember I was going through how hard is it, and reading including reading the tutorial, it took 5 minutes to add Blazor to an existing application. Does that immediately Blazorify everything and replace all your JavaScript? No. But if you wanted to start the transition to that kind of code reuse based on your need, I'm not advocating that 100% of the time you should replace a full JavaScript application with a full Blazor app. That's silly. Why would you do that? Unless you have unlimited funds and resources and don't care about, code quality, it's an unlimited time. Those are the best. Those are the best. I want a budget like that, right? Yeah. So that should give you a feel for, how much more advanced this can get. This is even using a SQLite database, which is kind of cool. And by the way, if you're using an offline version of this, you can start using SQLite. That's kind of cool, and do SQL queries locally. So someone was asking earlier, when would you make the call about where? Let's see if I can find. When would you make the call as to when you should write something in JavaScript versus C#? If it came to local data storage and manipulating data, and I could write all that using SQL and Dapper locally, let me tell you, that's the first thing I'm going to do. If I could use Link to do all my data manipulation locally, that's what I'm going to do, because it's that much more powerful. And I know it. I can do things in parallel and not like JavaScript parallel. Okay. So the third item I was going to show you, I showed you the more advanced one from Microsoft. is also I've got a project called Real Exit Interview that I did a while ago, well, earlier this year. And in my project, I do a lot of database access. And I even have one that's like my AI text gen service, but I have like an email sender service. So anytime I want to send emails, I just inject my email sender. So when you click, you know, invite people to use this, I can just call my email sender. I don't have to make an API call to the back end. I just, when I'm inviting people, if I go over to, it's been so long since I've been in here. Let's see, my logged in, like invite coworkers. Um, oh yeah, I guess I do it all through my Real Exit Interview service. But when I want to go and work on like inserting data into the database, I just inject my Real Exit Interview service. And now I have functions to queue worker survey invitations. And look at all this. I get to use all my link. I get to save things in transactions. Look at that. Transaction scope. Imagine doing that with JavaScript. I mean, you don't want to. You don't want to imagine doing that. Yeah. But if you can make that call without writing an API, do you see where the power of that is? And that I didn't have to stop, build my middle tier, and then hope that the message got all the way through. I could immediately make the call. And all I did was create a first-class service that I inject into the components that I need it in, and it just does it. I mean, that's a pretty fascinating thing when you think about it, when it comes to time to market, time to delivery, code reuse, code quality, the testability of it, all just across the board, the things that you eliminate, like the risk factors that you eliminate by not having to have all this additional wire up just to make one function in your code work. Think of the numbers. Think of the numbers in your head. Every time you've had to do it, how long did it take you before you could actually test your function? And it was usually after lunch. You wrote whatever one piece in the morning, and you did the other piece in the afternoon. What the hell? Right? For simple applications. So, getting back to this, and I'll just spend a few more minutes because I've shown you pretty much everything. And let me see if there's any questions. Yeah, code behinds. Yeah, code behinds are great. So I showed you the interactive components. That all happens over SignalR. My understanding, although I haven't played with it, is that if you use the auto mode, that certain pieces can be in WebAssembly as well. So locally, you could have some of the WebAssembly, and then other pieces go over SignalR. Now, I think you might have to do that on a per page basis or a per component basis. Yeah. So you might have a lot of benefit there, especially if you need to deal with a lot of data. So that's up to you. Play around with it. You can always scale because you don't have to keep writing the code in two different languages. So you can play around with different approaches without calling your JavaScript devs. Hey, could you update this? So I already went over the page interactivity types and the code behinds. We went over the pizza company. Cool thing about the pizza company one is how easy it is for you to build components. So the ability for you to take that code and then move it, or for reuse in your website, but not only your website, also your mobile app. If you're presenting data in your mobile application, you could reuse the code that formats that component and the component itself. That's money. That's money that's been saved. That's development time. That's a test that didn't have to be run. It's pretty amazing how much that helps you. And like I said, components can communicate with each other. So you saw how you can grab parameters, pass them in. You can actually bind properties to query string parameters, and you can maintain state through parameters. So you can have changes. I didn't get into this because it's more advanced. You can have the changes cascade through components. So all that state management can be handled through attributes. Simple attributes. Kind of like you're used to with .NET, right? I mean, like everything can be done through an attribute, and you still get that kind of power with Blazor. And then, of course, for simple applications, you no longer have to write that middle tier API. I can't stress how important that is to your ability to ship quickly. And because all that stuff's working, the nice thing is if you do need to build the API, at least you know that the web piece will continue to work as you move things over to an API. And you can even inject the API and make the calls through it on your pages if you wanted to do like a full flip-flop, like you were going to use the web application and the mobile application with the same API tier. You could do that. You could have a client that both the web application and the mobile application use that share off. I mean, look at that. You wrote it once. And I'm super excited about being able to access a database by just injecting my access service. Now, if you want to access JavaScript, it's not hidden. Like I said, it's necessary in some cases, and your order of operations matters. I'm looking to see if I have that in here to show you. Where's my main layout? Do I have it in here? Yeah, like I'm using like Google's reCAPTCHA here, so it's not like you suddenly can't use JavaScript anywhere. And then if you want to, you just inject the JavaScript runtime. It's called IJS runtime. You'll have to add that as a scoped service, and then you can inject it. Pretty simple. And then you can just say JS runtime.invoke. And then you can give it the name of the function, which could be just like the name of a function on a page or a script. And then you can even pass in parameters, and it'll automatically send that off to JavaScript as a JS object. So, yeah, you've got first-class access to that too. So if you want to communicate with JavaScript, you absolutely can. And it's mostly a first-class citizen. I don't usually have to do it, though, but it does work just like a champ. But you must inject the JS runtime. Otherwise, it'll go boom. They'll say, this is null, and you'll be very unhappy. Now, pros and cons and gotchas. So pros, like I said, one language to rule them all. Learn C#, you do practically 100% of the work. Code reuse, no separate API. And I hate to bring up a term from like 2001, but it's RAD. Yeah, it's true rapid application development. Cons, SignalR. Sometimes it disconnects. If you're scaling it or you don't have it configured right, you'll see this more in production. You need to get some of the SignalR settings right, especially if you're working with a lot of data. If it's simple, like the Click Me app, okay, yeah, you're not going to have problems. But the default message size is like 32K. If you're going to deal with larger blocks, you're going to have to increase that. If you're using WebAssembly, you're probably going to have to use an API. That's the reality of it. But that's not a bad thing. especially if you're going to scale to using a mobile app. The tooling still has not come to 100% maturity. It's a ton better than it used to be, but I'm not going to say that Microsoft has no more bugs left. Just because I have found that the more complex a Blazor application gets, the more Visual Studio sometimes forgets that a page can be debugged. But that has gotten better with subsequent releases. So I know Microsoft's taking this very seriously. Or at least it seems to me that they are. So I'd say 90%. Yeah. And the worst that you need to do generally is you have to delete bin and obj and restart Visual Studio. But that's rare. I used to have to do it all the time, like a few months ago, and now it's pretty rare. Gotchas. Remember that in server, everything's running on the server. So if you start thinking that things are running on the client, you're lying to yourself. It's an SPA, but it's still running on the server. So that being said, DB Context Factory is your friend. HTTP Client Factory is your friend. All the factories that give you new instances are your friends. Otherwise, you will run into issues where I hated this, where like the database context is already in use. And you're like, why? Because I have it set up as scoped. It should be a new context per session, per client session. Nope. For some reason, Blazor doesn't seem to treat things that way. I don't know why. Maybe Microsoft's aware. I don't know. I'm not going to read all their backlogs. I'm just going to follow best practices and use a DB Context Factory because I guess I was too lazy to write the one line of code that would made that happen. 2, be careful of singletons. A singleton is running on the server. It's not a singleton running on the client. Where I ran into this is when I first released my site Lick. It would send a notification when people joined that says, live tasting has started. Live tasting has ended. And I was testing one day to see how many people I could use the site at the same time. And people started connecting. And that was working fine. Like SignalR worked like a champ. But my Toast notification service, that's the one that shows the messages, was a singleton because I saw no reason to have multiple instances of it. Until, as people joined, it would say, live tasting has started, live tasting has started, live tasting has started, live tasting start. I'm like, the hell? It's because the Toast service was a singleton on the server. And that's how I finally debugged that. First, I thought it was a bug, just like with the Toast component, because it was just me testing in 2 browsers. But once I got to 3+ people, I saw the folly of my ways. So keep that in mind. Always understand how the system you're using is working. Don't just trust in the magic. So if you want to learn more, thank you for sitting with me this whole time, or standing if you're at a standing desk, because everyone here is sitting. Microsoft Learn is a great place to go. There's free lessons, and they're pretty detailed. And I just greatly enjoyed it. So to those who wrote it, thank you. The Visual Studio Starter template will also get you going. I think it's a nice example of how to do some things. It's not great, but it's a good starting point. And just simply trial and error. As with any application, you can't go wrong with trial and error. Just make sure you're not connected to a production database when you do any of this. And that said, thank you. And any questions? I've answered everyone's questions. Oh, thank you very much. Arigato gozaimasu. Okay, I'm going to stop recording then. Whoop. If I can.
Very nice PowerPoint presentation.
No, thanks.